go. You ready?
Yes, sir.
All right. So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, folks, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. Very excited to have as my guest today, David Richman. David, welcome.
Thank you. I'm pretty happy to be here, guys. Thanks for having me.
You are welcome. So after working in a variety of industries, including launching 2 startups, David Richman entered the financial industry as an advisor. Several years in, he found that his interests were more in managing people and businesses than in managing money. Over the next 15 years, he managed ever larger businesses for the same Wall Street firm. As a former sedentary, overweight smoker, David knew that he needed to focus not on what others wanted of him, but what he wanted out of life. Through lessons learned in business and sport, David introduces the concept of, quote, middle of the pack, and discusses how to get more out of ourselves than ever imagined. After losing his sister to brain cancer, David organized a yearly fundraiser in her memory, the most recent being the impetus for his upcoming book, Cycle of Lives, 15 People's Stories, 5,000 Miles, and a Journey Through the Emotional Chaos of Cancer. David, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah. That's pretty accurate for sure. Except for now, the
So
book is out. I guess it's not an upcoming book. It's out.
awesome.
That
Okay,
one.
and we'll talk about that.
Yes.
So let's why are we talking today? Let me put that to
Well,
you.
listen. You have experts on talking about every facet of trauma, all kinds of trauma. Acute, secondary, primary. From the caregiver standpoint, from a pro standpoint. I mean, there's just you name it. And I'm no therapist, right? That's not what I do. I think what drew me to the Cycle of Lives project was this constant dynamic that I ran into, Guy, when I watched my sister go through her battle with terminal cancer, is that people were really good. And I'm talking about the doctors, the patients, the caregivers, the loved ones, you name it. People were really good about talking about the tasks related to their cancer and to other traumas. They were really, how do I get my kids watched? How do I navigate work? How do I eat better? How do I find better sleep? What kind of new procedures are out there? How can I get holistic medicines? Blah, 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 blah. But when it comes to talking about the emotional aspects of the trauma, that's when people really were quiet. They were isolating. They were hesitant to let other people in. They were hesitant to start those conversations. And I was really shocked by that. And I wanted to try to figure out why.
Why
So,
were you drawn to that in the first place? Why did you pick that up? Why is that important to you?
well, I thought it was important because I didn't purposely have really deep and wide-ranging conversations with my sister because of that dynamic, but that just was something that we were fortunate to have done, right? I was fortunate. I was so enthralled by her. I admired her. We both had a pretty traumatic childhood, and she was much more in tune with her purpose in life and how she interacted with the world around her. And I kind of was like, wow, man, I wish I could be more like her. So when I was going through a major transformation of becoming healthy and getting rid of the stresses in my life that I could control and making better decisions and putting down cigarettes and trying to eat better, and then starting down a road of endurance athletics. I wanted to learn as much as I could from her, so we just talked about everything. And it was such a strong dynamic. It hit me when I was doing it. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Relay for Life. That's an American Cancer Society. They do them all around the country. They're like these 24-hour events where people put a team together. They walk around a track. It's educational. It's informative. They bond. It's an emotional thing, and it's a very lively event. Okay, very very positive, lively event. And I mean, it's heavy subject. Sometimes we're dealing with some pretty heavy subjects at these Relay for Lives, but it's very interactive and very like boom, high energy. But then, when the sun goes down and we start talking about like the heavier stuff, it gets really quiet. And I can see people having the conversations in their heads and not with each other. And that I was shocked by that. And I said, man, I got to try to figure out why. Because I know, and anybody listening knows, you have people at work, people in your life, even, your spouse, perhaps, where something difficult is happening and you're like, oh, I just don't know what to say. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to say the wrong thing.
Sure.
Right. And so I wanted to say, well, if I could reveal really inspiring, evocative stories of real people and talk about the real traumas that happened in their lives and how those traumas either inhibited or helped them later in life dealing with things such as cancer and their
Mm-hmm.
ability to make more authentic connections with others. If I could shed some light on that, then maybe it could give us a couple extra tools so that when we are going through something or when we know somebody that's going through something, we might be empowered to start those hard conversations about the emotional aspects. So,
Right. Right.
long answer, but that's pretty much what drove me to it.
Awesome. So help me understand the chronology of this,
Mm-hmm.
of your sister's diagnosis
Mm-hmm.
relative to your getting healthy and so forth.
It
What?
happened. Yeah, it happened in a very short period of time. These kind of catalysts for all of these events. So
Right.
I was in my late 30s. I was in a relationship with an abusive alcoholic. I had 4-year-old twins, and I was overweight. I was a smoker. I was stressed out. I had made a ton of bad decisions. I guess my life would be, if I gave you an analogy, it's like I kept my head down and either dealt with problems or looked for them so I could try to solve them. Right. I never really like put my head up and saw how did I interact with the world. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I was successful in business. I had friends, I mean, my life wasn't a total wreck, but in a lot of ways, I was at a really, really low point. And during that time, I got a conversation with a friend who told me the right thing. You know how sometimes you don't hear what you need to hear until you hear it.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I needed to hear what he told me, even though I might have heard it 100 ways, which is he said to me, look, dude, I'm tired of you complaining. He goes, everything in your life is a wild animal. And
Wow.
you go find these wild animals and then you bring it home and you feed it and you clean it up and then you go to pet it and it bites you. And then you look at it like, why in the heck did you bite me? He
Interesting.
goes, wild animals don't know any better. Your problems are problems that can't be solved. Why don't you look in the mirror and figure out what your problem is?
Wow. So this was a good friend of yours?
Good friend of mine.
Wow.
And I and obviously I pushed back on that at the beginning because I'm like, I'm not the problem. Everybody else is the problem.
Right.
Right. It's like, they're mean or I've got this this roadblock or it's this unsolvable issue. And he was like, no, no, it's actually you. Like you're the problem.
Wow.
What are you doing wrong? Why are you trying to fix things that can't be fixed? Why are you taking on things that you shouldn't be taking on? Why
Mm-hmm.
are you so bothered by not being able to change the situation that shouldn't be changed anyway? Like, what's your problem?
Right. So
And I
just
went,
1 second here.
wow.
So just context. You're married.
Yep.
You're unhealthy. You said you're married to the person you're married to is unhealthy. You've got
Very.
twins, young
Mhm.
twins.
4 years old.
Okay. And your business is doing you're successful, you said.
Yes.
Okay. Isn't it interesting how that can happen?
Yeah.
But okay, so go on.
Right. Because my negative energy was faced on all these personal issues. My positive energy was an outlet for having some type of success. Right.
Right.
Because I wasn't having success in my awareness. I wasn't having success in my personal relationship. I wasn't having success in my emotional well being. So I kind of channeled my energies to see some success. And at least I was in business and I had some friends. And, I mean, there were things that were not, I mean, it wasn't, terrible life, but
Right.
I mean, really, I
How
was
long
a
had you been
year,
married at this point?
about 7 years.
Okay. Okay. So continue, please.
Yeah. So when I picked up my head and Guy, I didn't do it figuratively. I did it literally. Like I looked in the mirror and I got my kids and me to safety and said, okay, now's your time. And I literally stood in front of the mirror in the bathroom for like an hour one night. And I just said to myself out loud over and over, like, dude, who are you? Like, what are you trying to accomplish in life? What have you done? What's the good things about you? What are the bad things about you? Like, what are your problems? Like take a real honest assessment. Like, man, you got to do that
Mm-hmm.
because whatever you've been doing is not working out. And if it is you, you better start working on the dude in the mirror, right? and so I was open to the idea that it wasn't me against the world, that maybe it was me against me the whole time.
Hmm.
And I was open to that. So I I I decided to make a change, and I saw this big long path ahead of me, right? Of enlightenment, of learning, of finding out who I am and how I interact with the world, which mostly I did through endurance athletics. It's a great was a great vehicle for me. At that same time, that's when I get the call from my sister. You know, I've got terminal brain cancer, and I could see that her journey was going to be very short.
Mm.
And I was really taken by that. So I wanted to get as much as I could out of her and
Hmm.
learn from her and witness what she was going through as I'm embarking on what I consider the first few steps of a purposeful, meaningful, you know, um, authentic life. And so is that dynamic that just really hit me at that time. And so in my late 30s, I started, dealing with myself, and in the background was watching what she was going through. So that's the timeline.
From the time that she got the diagnosis, how long did she have?
Well, thankfully, she became a board study because her cancer was so rare that the cancer center that took care of her made her a board study, and it probably enhanced her care and probably lengthened her life as well. But I think from that phone call to her death was just a little bit under 4 years, so it was
Oh,
a pretty
wow.
long time.
Right.
But I mean, it wasn't like there one day and then gone, and all of a
Hmm.
sudden, she's gone. I mean, she dealt with a pretty heavy amount of care and critical care, along that path.
Hmm.
So it was about 4 years, and by then, 4 years later, now I'm like, I'm kind of more enlightened about myself. I'm really in touch with who I am. I'm doing, Ironmans and 50-mile
Wow.
runs, and I've become this, pretty healthy, and I'm much more emotionally and psychologically healthy
Yeah,
because,
yeah, yeah.
Guy, when you sit down to do therapy for an hour, that's really a good thing to do. When you self care for an hour or two or three, that's a really good. I was self caring for 8 or 10 or 12 hours. I'd go on a 10-hour run up in the mountains, or, 24-hour bike ride. And man, you can do a lot of self care and a lot of self
Hmm.
analysis and a lot of meditation and, really trying to solve some puzzles while doing that. So I was in a much healthier place at 4 years later,
Yeah.
where she was right there at her death at that time.
So when you got that call from your friend, you said that was you got your kids a safety. Does that
Hmm.
mean you left your wife at
Yes.
that time? Okay.
Yeah.
And obviously that sounded like a wake up call for you. You're like, I got to get my life together.
Hmm.
Um, how did you start doing this endurance stuff?
Well, I really don't like being a failure. And I, if I'm going to invest myself in anything, I want to make sure that I don't fail, or I give it every best shot. And I had never tried to quit smoking because I didn't want to make it okay to fail at it. So when I finally heard what I needed to hear at that time,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, I just said, okay, put down the cigarettes and, like, don't smoke, like don't fail, like don't ever smoke
Mm-hmm.
again. So it kind of made it easy in that sense, that I was not going to accept failing at quitting smoking. And then I mean, honestly, I couldn't run down the block, right? I couldn't run. I was 38 years old, 39 years old, and had smoked a quarter of a million cigarettes and was 70, 65, 70 pounds overweight. I
Right.
mean, what did you expect? But eventually I could jog 2 minutes, and then I could jog a mile. And then, several weeks later, I did a 5K. And 3 or 4 months later, I did a half Ironman. And 7 or 8 months later, I did a full Ironman. I just really dove into it.
Right.
And, you, you know, it's amazing. The human body is absolutely amazing how it can adapt to being healthy or unhealthy. And I just poured myself into being healthy, and my body was able to adapt very quickly to the demands and the requests I was putting on it. And I was very curious to find out where that was going to lead me.
Mm-hmm.
And it led me to do some ridiculous endurance events, but they were all learning exercises.
In relation to what your sister was experiencing psychologically? You know, how did she accept this news? How did she move through
Mhm.
her process?
Yeah, and everybody deals with trauma, acute medical issues differently. In her case, and I totally respect, like doing this project, I totally have come to admire and respect how each person's response to trauma is valid.
Mm-hmm.
And losing a finger could be more traumatic to someone than losing a leg is to somebody else. I mean, it's just we're just wired differently, and
Yeah.
we handle things a different way. For her, she had a very healthy marriage, very, very great circle of friends. She was very grounded, very authentic, very connected to the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she was, well, I know she was partially grateful to know that she was going to have time to absorb the gratitude and share the gratitude that she felt for what she was given in life and what she had attained in life. And also, I think well, I know she was equally as burdened by the fact that she was going to have to leave behind a life that she really loved living.
Mm-hmm.
And so she never was dark in her mood. Um, she never felt pity for herself, or she never asked for sympathy, and I don't think she would have accepted it. I think she just settled into the reality of, I've got to make the most of each day, because each day is not going to last forever for me. And I remember one conversation I had with a guy where we're on the back in her backyard, and we were watching our kids jump on one of those little trampoline things. And I looked over and I go, man, I go, it's got to be hard, but like, what are you thinking right now? Because you're not going to be around much longer. And she goes, she goes, I think the hardest thing, David, is that I'm just not going to watch my kids grow up. I mean, it just
Mm.
sucks. I mean, it just sucks. And just, we just talked real like that. And so
Mm-hmm.
how did she handle it? With a little bit of grace, with a little bit of fear, with a whole lot of gratitude for what she had.
Mm-hmm.
And if there is a silver lining, there's not many silver linings to quote unquote terminal cancer. One of the silver linings can be that it does give you time to
Right.
reflect and absorb and engage with people at a meaningful level if you're properly equipped to do that. She was way more equipped than most people I've run into.
So when she found out you had begun your quote unquote healing journey, in a sense,
Mm-hmm.
how far into it were you?
So, uh, right at the same time, we were within
Oh
weeks of me
wow.
putting down cigarettes
Oh
was when
wow.
she told me
Okay.
she got terminal brain cancer. And it was within weeks, because she had been diagnosed. And my daughter, who was not quite 5, said to me, I was very open with them because we had a lot going on. And she had heard at like preschool that smoking causes cancer. And obviously she knew that June had been diagnosed with cancer. And she said to me, hey, would you stop smoking? Because I don't want you to die like Aunt June's going to die. And I went, oh, ding, ding, ding. Like I had heard it 100 times, but I didn't hear it until that time.
Right.
And so it was right at the exact same time, which kind of gave it a little bit more importance and urgency as well.
So I just want to remind everyone that I'm speaking with David Richman. Um, when did you start writing this book? Why did you start writing this book?
Hmm. So um, I was really touched by and drawn to this idea. Um, and it wasn't like a spark and then all of a sudden go out and write the book, right? There are multiple things that happened in my life that made it so that this was a dynamic that I really wanted to explore. One of those examples was not too much after June passed, about a year later, the financial crisis came to a full blow. I was in the financial services business, and we had experienced, I had a very large number of people reporting to me, and one of them took their own life.
Oh boy.
It was exceptionally traumatic for the people that we worked with. And I was shocked to find out that every single person I talked to before we could bring in a crisis management therapist, every person that I spoke to had a first person experience with suicide. And I'm just like, how in the world do I not know this? Because I've been
Mm-hmm.
to these people's funerals and weddings and had them over for barbecues and talked about their kids. And how do I not know that they've been so affected by something so traumatic? And it just weighed on me. Like, how are we carrying around so much trauma inside of us that it's so hard? And then sometimes I'd hear something bad about an employee or about a friend, and I'm like, I don't want to talk. I don't know what to say. Right. And this was the dynamic that I came up with, or noticed, rather, just over and over and over.
Mm-hmm.
And so what made me want to write the book is I said, if I could not provide answers, I'm not qualified to provide answers, but if I could expose in the deepest, most authentic, you know, down the darkest hallways of people's past and their experiences, if I could find enough evocative, interesting, relatable people
Mm-hmm.
who would be willing to go on a long journey to try to unpack what happened to them in their adolescence, their young adulthood, their childhood, what traumas that I could identify with that we could explore together,
Mm-hmm.
and how those did affect them later in life as they were, if they were abandoned as a child, how were they able to or not able to accept help as an adult, that kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. So I just went on this crazy search to go find these interesting dynamic people, which was not easy to do. It took me a while to find the right mix of people, because I wanted doctors, I wanted patients, nurses, I wanted medical professionals, I wanted people who survived cancer, I wanted people that were just only afraid of cancer or had cancer multiple times when they were young, when they were old. I wanted a wide range of emotional responses to cancer, which
So
range.
let
Yeah,
me interrupt for a second.
yeah.
So the concept of the book was to get these people and to together.
No, to individually talk with them as long as I could,
Okay.
and to get as deep into their stories as I could so that I could reveal the true essence of their experience, which,
Okay.
look, it's trite to say this, and I'm not a fan of trite sayings, but when you think about, you never know what people have gone through or what they're going through. I mean, that if you take a moment, especially as it relates to trauma, I mean, what people have gone through or what they're going through sometimes is just mind numbing. And
Yeah.
and they're just living their lives, right? But when you think about, oh my God, like what you've had to endure, what you've had to overcome, it's just unbelievable. And so I was really moved by that, knowing, about what happened over, the issues we just talked about, what, what happened with my sister and some other things that have happened, like the trauma I went through. You would have asked anybody that knew me, they didn't know I was in a relationship where I was being physically abused, right? We hide these traumas. We just are living our lives and doing the best we can. And I wanted to expose the stories of people that would let me expose them for
Mm-hmm.
their strengths and for their weaknesses, on how they were able to or unable to overcome these traumas as it related to their ability to connect with others during things such as cancer.
I just want to say something. First of all, I really appreciate coming on here.
Hmm.
Um, but I think what's really missing from this conversation, David, is I mean, you obviously have a an energy towards uh getting to the heart of
Hmm.
of what's going on, an energy towards a focus and an energy towards getting to wanting to find out what is at the bottom here. But what we haven't discussed and what you've alluded to is what you experienced.
Hmm.
And you just said you were in an abusive relationship.
Hmm.
Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, look, I grew up in a very traumatic childhood. I had parents that were nearly 40 years in age difference,
Wow.
right? Which is remarkable, right? So I had one parent that was exceptionally young, didn't really want kids, and didn't know how to handle them, and another parent who was exceptionally old and didn't want kids and didn't know how to handle them. So yeah, I kind of grew up like just trying to figure things out on my own. And when I went out in the world, one of the first experiences that I had was 3 days after leaving home at age 18. I found myself at the barrel of a gun, being robbed of everything that I owned, and I didn't know who to call and how to deal with it, and ended up living out of my car until I could figure it out at 18 years old. And I just learned how to plow along and just figure it out. If I got to work
Mm-hmm.
2 full-time jobs, I'll do it. If I got to pretend that I'm, this, I'll do it. And I ended up getting bigger and bigger jobs and more responsibility. And I'm able to, like, on one side of the coin, really like plow through my problems and plow through the roadblocks to achieve success. On the other side, I was a wreck, and so I didn't know it at the time, but when I found out, yeah, I ended up I ended up marrying my mother,
Mm.
an abusive, disconnected, absolutely unable to be made happy person. And, again, I didn't go into it knowing that, but
Right.
clearly
Sure.
that's what I did. And, one day I just found myself, at this point where I'm just like, yeah, maybe I'm the problem. Like, why did I have to find somebody that rotten? Like, she
Mm-hmm.
doesn't know any better. Like, that's just who she is. But what's my attraction to that? I shouldn't
Mm-hmm.
have an attraction to that. I'm a good person. I like good people, right? I'm a nice person. I like nice people.
Right.
Okay. So, what's my problem? Why am I going after things that can't be fixed and trying to fix them? That's just the wrong approach. And so, yeah, I was traumatized, and mostly because when I took a look in the mirror, I didn't like the choices I had made.
Mm-hmm.
I like to say, Guy, that I learned a whole lot of tough lessons,
Yeah.
yeah, obviously, but I never knew how to apply them to myself. And so the lessons learned started to become more applicable to me once I allowed myself to start working on me.
Did
And
you was part of that did you see a therapist at some point?
I did. I
I
did
mean, you
seek a
seem
little.
very self-aware.
Hmm. I, 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 I did, but for me, the therapy only was a springboard to understanding that it was okay to examine myself in an
Yeah.
authentic way.
Yeah.
Um, I don't think I was looking for somebody to give me answers. I was looking to discover answers
Mm-hmm.
and to learn in a proactive, authentic me into the world and the world back into me, like purposeful, heads up kind of way.
Yeah.
And I think freeing myself, allowing myself the freedom to be able to say, let it all go and start this awareness on purpose,
Mm-hmm.
authentic kind of journey, was helped by getting some professional help, because it says, like, okay, you're valid to be able to focus on yourself. You're
Right.
valid to be able to worry about you as number one. Cause I never worried about the guy in the mirror. I never had my head up,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
I worried about how's everybody else going to perceive me? How am I going to solve the problem? What do I need to do so that they'll give me a raise? What do I need to do so that they'll be happier? It was never about me. And it's a problem I still work on.
The book is called Cycle of Lives,
Hmm.
15 People's Stories, 5,000 Miles, and a Journey Through the Emotional Chaos of Cancer. So how did you start finding these people?
Yeah. So I knew a couple of people, and I went to a personal circles, and I said, hey, here's what I'm thinking about doing. Do you know anybody?
Who and
And
who are
then
you who are you looking for?
here's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for people that have an experience with cancer, as a doctor, as a medical professional, as a nurse, as a patient, as a survivor, as a loved one, watching a friend go through cancer, watching a parent having a kid with cancer. So I wanted this kind of this gray voodoo-y, I don't understand cancer kind of thing, because who isn't afraid of cancer,
Right.
right? Or doesn't know how to deal with it, or doesn't know how to allow others to help them, or I mean, there's a million. Cancer is just very unique in that way.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted that, and I wanted people of different ages, and I wanted different types of cancer and experiences with cancer. So I didn't want 15 people with brain cancer. I wanted, whatever cancer was. But most importantly, is I wanted different emotional responses to their cancer journey:
Mm.
gratitude, fear, joy, I've experienced all of those with the people I interviewed, and I wanted all of that wrapped up. And my process was this, guy. If point A is when you encounter cancer, as an eighth grader going on a field trip to the hospital saying I'm going to become a doctor,
Mm-hmm.
or as a adult being diagnosed with cancer, point A is cancer. Point B is today. How were you able to or unable to navigate the emotional aspects of that trauma in relation to all the stuff that happened before point A?
Mm-hmm.
Because that was the key, is to understanding what people have gone through or what they are going through relative to their life experience and how that affects their ability. Because I thought, man, I was so fortunate to connect with my sister in a level that we did through her trauma. And at times during the issue I talked to you about during the financial crisis, there were a few people I could connect with. And I thought, man, those connections, they don't go away.
Right.
They're deep, authentic, real, even if they're in passing, they're just so meaningful to the people involved in it. I just wanted to be able to understand, like, how can we connect to these people? What can we learn from them so we can take it to our own lives?
Mm-hmm.
And if we have a situation, where we need to let others in, or where we're hoping they'll let us in, that we might be able to do that in a deeper level. And so I tried to fill out this kind of, like, imagine this cycle, right? Cycle of life. Imagine this a wheel, and the sectors are emotion, age, type of cancer, when they experience that, fear of cancer versus having it 5 times, whatever. I
Right.
wanted to fill in as many of those as possible so that I could give a 360, as much of a 360 view on the human experience as possible. And so, yeah, go ahead.
What surprised you? One of the things that surprised you about writing this book?
Multiple things surprised me, but I think what I had hoped going into it, all right, I didn't want to be myopic and say I'm creating the reality that I'm seeing. I wanted to make sure was that every single person I spoke to had some, yeah, I'm nodding my head in agreement at the thought of, I don't know what to say. I don't know how to navigate those hard discussions about the emotional side of stuff. Like, I don't want to put my foot in my mouth. I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
show sympathy where they don't want sympathy. I don't want I don't want to be ashamed. I'm embarrassed. I don't, all, you name it. We have these limiters that just don't allow us to easily navigate the hard conversation. I can
Mm-hmm.
drop off a casserole every day, but to knock on the door with a
Right.
box of Kleenex and to sit down with you and cry with you is a lot harder to do. So I learned that everybody has some level of, yeah, I don't know what to say. Grandma just died. I don't know what to say to grandpa. Right. So there was some level of that. The other thing that I found astounding is the true depths of what was behind what we talked about a minute ago, which is you never know what people have gone through, what they're going through. And it was amazing to me that I spoke to people, every single person I spoke to, guy, they said at the very beginning, I don't know why we're talking. My life's not that interesting, right? Because we're all just living our lives trying to do the best we could do. And meanwhile, I get into their story and I'm like, holy cow, like, that's the most interesting thing I've ever heard. I got to
Right.
get this right, because how could I not tell people about that? Because it's unbelievable. It's totally going to move people. And they were
Right.
like, oh, I'm just living my life. And I'm like, yeah. So that was something I learned. That was amazing.
How did you meet these people? Did you do it in person, over Zoom, or what?
I
Both?
purposely didn't do it in person or over Zoom. I purposely did it over the phone,
Okay.
because I
Interesting.
wanted people to have a safe space to not feel that they were visually being judged.
Yep.
I wanted them to, I mean, we know that dynamic is sometimes easier to talk to a stranger than it is to people that are close to us. So I wanted to keep that there, even though I got very, very close to many of the people I spoke to. I purposely didn't want this "you're being judged" type of thing, and I didn't want them to feel like, because I'm certainly not qualified to be a therapist. I didn't want them to feel like it was therapy. I was
Yeah.
just trying to get their story out, and to get their story out, I quote unquote interviewed them over the phone many, 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 many hours over a very, very long period of time. Some of them 100 hours as we
Wow.
spoke. I mean, really deep, deep
Wow.
conversations about just unending traumas and things that they had done in their life. Many people I spoke to, other people in their lives. So, for example, one story is about a man who lost his wife of 25 years, mother of their kids, 6 kids. I spoke to her after she passed. I spoke to him for many, many hours, but I spoke to her mom. I spoke to her sisters, right? Because I wanted to understand the dynamic behind what made this person tick and what could we learn from her story.
Why was this so important to you?
If you're going to write a story about somebody's life, the essence of an experience or multiple experiences, um, you have to get it right. And I hate failing at something really, really important.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was really important that when I found these absolutely inspiring, evocative, moving stories, even just hearing a simple statement, and I was just like, wow, that's not possible, or oh my God, I got to find out more. And I found out that I'm stepping into somebody's real life, and they're giving me the opportunity to go down all the hallways and unlock all the boxes and reveal themselves for who they truly are. Man, I better get it right.
Mm-hmm.
And so just starting it, I could not quit and I could not fail. I had to do it right. And I'll tell you, the scariest thing about writing these stories was when I was done writing it and sending it to each person saying, hey, did I get this right? Because this was their revealed lives.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so it just had a higher sense of purpose and a higher sense of meaning that these were not anonymous people, the names are not changed to protect the innocent, right? They're you could go look at everybody, right? They're real people who are willing
Mm-hmm.
to say, here's what I've learned, here's what you might be able to learn, here's what I didn't learn that maybe you could learn from, right? And it was so it just had a real sense of purpose for me.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like you have a real appreciation for like the intimacy of being, like the intimacy of communication, the intimacy of vulnerability and authenticity.
Mhm.
It seemed that theme kind of emanates from you.
Yeah, it does. And let me tell you a super quick story, and it's kind of what drives everything from that moment of enlightenment that I told you about. Okay. So I'm doing this 87-mile rollerblade race in Georgia. Okay. I don't have any business doing that. What's 87 miles on rollerblades for anybody that's not an athlete? I'm not an athlete at this point. I'm just starting to do endurance events, right? And I sought out doing this because I wanted to see what are my limits. Where am I at? What am I made of? Who are you? What can you accomplish? So I say, well, let's do something ridiculously out of your league. Let's go do an 87-mile rollerblade race. About 30 miles in, I was done. Hit the wall. Physically, emotionally, yeah, I couldn't move. I couldn't think. I'm dripping white sweat because I'm so dehydrated. It's hot.
Right.
It's miserable. I'm done. I'm done. And I remember having this short little conversation with myself that said, all right, dude, well, what the hell, man? I mean, you learned everything about yourself. Now you can go home and you can feel totally great that you reached every limit, physical, emotional, spiritual, that you could ever find. You found it. Good for you. Now go home and learn from that. And then I had this little voice inside of my head, guy, that said, gosh, if you do take one step, you enter an area that you didn't know anything about, right? Because you've never been that pressed emotionally, physically, spiritually, goal wise, nothing. And then you take another step, you're going to learn, and another step, and another step. And 6.5 hours later, I made it to the finish line somehow, and I learned maybe 1,000 things. And I feel like anytime that I've tried to do something on purpose that's meaningful, or I'm involved in something that's meaningful for somebody else that they're allowing me to be involved in, and it has purpose, and it's authentic, and it's real, then yeah, I do have that sense of wonderment of what can we learn, and how can we apply this in a positive way. So every task that I take under that's kind of like this, I don't know, that's pushing myself, or I'm being pushed, or
Mm-hmm.
what I go, oof, what can I learn? And
Mm-hmm.
so that's a big draw for me.
Awesome. The book is called Cycle of Lives, 15 People's Stories, 5,000 Miles and a Journey Through the Emotional Chaos of Cancer. It's available everywhere books are sold.
Everywhere
Usual.
books are sold. And one
Okay.
of the cool things about this book, not all my books, but this book, is that from the start and until infinity, 100% of the proceeds are going to the cancer focused organizations that were chosen by the book participants. So those are listed in the book,
Wow.
listed on my website. But I thought it was important. Each one had an affinity for an organization that they really cared for, while they were being cared for, right? And so I said, well, let's do good and make sure that we raise some money. So 100% of the net proceeds are going to those organizations.
Wow. I'm laughing because you're pretty amazing dude, David. It's kind of
I don't know.
crazy. No, you are. David Richman, what's the best way people can get in contact with you?
Well, I do some speaking. I do I do expressive writing workshops, which is absolutely amazing. I had another beautiful one last night with a cancer organization in the West Coast. And um, if this touches anyone, they can find me at cycleoflives.org,
Okay.
cycleoflives.org, or you can just look up David Richman and cancer book or whatever book, and you'll find me, and I'll connect with you. We're pretty good about that. And look, I'm a very fortunate person, and so I love telling the stories of these people because I think there's just so much we can learn. And
Yeah.
so anytime I have a chance to do that, why not take advantage of it?
I appreciate it. I appreciate you coming on here
Mhm.
and sharing this, man. It's awesome. Love to have you back and keep up to date with what's going on.
Yeah, let's do it. I appreciate that. Thank
All
you.
right, man. David, thanks. Honor having you on here. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Guy.